Welcome to CPG, the Cannabis Packaged Goods Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
Well, thanks for joining today, Graham. Really excited to talk to you about all things Glasshouse Group.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's start with a little background on Glasshouse. So Glasshouse started in 2015 when you and Kyle formed the first investment fund, which eventually became the Glasshouse. Can you tell me a little bit about that story?
Yeah, sure. It's actually a pretty funny story. So back in 2015, I originally found what would be the genesis or the original seed of Glasshouse, which was a really nice farm in Carpinteria. Carpinteria is a part of Santa Barbara County, which is where we grow and where I live. I'm lucky enough to get to grow cannabis in my hometown of Santa Barbara, which who would have thought Santa Barbara would be one of the spots that was a cannabis cultivation capital, but it is, and I'm sure lucky to be here. So found the first farm is a 150,000 square foot farm. Went into a Dutch farmer and basically said, "Hey, I want to buy your farm." It wasn't for sale. He thought we were nuts, but I probably thought he was ripping our face off. And at the time, given where things were, maybe he was a little bit, but we had a vision and a belief that we could grow high quality craft cannabis at scale, and that Santa Barbara was the spot to do it. And so Kyle and I met through that. He was a real estate guy by background, believed in cannabis. He was actually a former law enforcement officer after being a special ed teacher. And so he'd seen the drug war firsthand, and what he learned from that was it was bullshit, and he didn't want to support it, and he actively wanted to fight against it. And so he kind of put his real estate background and his anti-prohibition beliefs together, and we bought the farm and helped fundraise it as a private equity fund. You're talking five people kind of thing, right? Not like some big Wall Street deal at the time. This is the early days of cannabis. Ordinances were new, taxes were new. Prop 64 hadn't even passed yet. It was Prop 215 medical days. We bought this farm. We started it up, and we liked how it was going, and we realized that we certainly didn't know everything to do, and maybe we knew more things that we not to do, and that's sometimes just as valuable. But we believed, and I think we're right, that we were at least on the front edge of that migration from kind of garages and warehouses and small things to more large scale service the state of California side of things. And then from that we went and bought the second farm, which is also in this same neighborhood. It's 355,000 square feet. So between the two is the 500,000 square feet of licensed and operational greenhouse that we have today.
Amazing. And that, as you mentioned, was the medical days in California.
Yeah.
So even pre-adult use. How was that transition? Pretty straightforward for you guys, or was it?
No, I don't think anything's straightforward in cannabis. Prop 215 had certainly, there's pros and cons to both, right? So Prop 215 had a lot less regulations, but it also had a lot less clarity. So there was a whole bunch of things that in Prop 15, for example, 6 plants per patient or doctor's recommendation. So the entire structure of how we built things in the first greenhouse was a lot fewer but larger plants, so that we didn't have regulatory conflict of if we had 50,000 1-gallon pots, that means you'd have to have 9,000 patient recommendations. So instead we have 10,000 larger pots, right? That's not the most efficient way to grow, but it kept us compliant. Didn't have testing requirements, but that also meant that people were buying things that they didn't know what was in it, right? And certainly, we had anxiety around if it, back in those days, if the sheriff knocked on the door, he doesn't know what to do, we don't know what to do, we think we're doing it right, etc. Now, there's total clarity on that, right? We have permits hanging on the wall, we have metric tags on everything, every 50-pound batch is tested, 66 different pesticides, parts per billion. So there's a lot of clarity. There's also a lot of rules. There's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of taxes. The pendulum kind of swung too far over on that point of view, but it also has put it on the table very plainly. Lots of conversation, lots of awareness of the benefits of cannabis is coming out, the tax revenue, the jobs that are created. We just saw an article yesterday that in Oregon, the pendulum's coming back a little bit to the middle. They're actually loosening some of the regulations. So, now between California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, I don't know, we probably have 20 collective years, maybe more, of adult use, and everybody has seen nothing happen, right? People were looking for that negative story. They were looking for
right.
they legalized cannabis and then,
Sky is falling.
Goes through, but teen usage doesn't go up, car accidents don't go up, jobs get created, tax revenue gets generated, but nothing else happens, right? I mean, you have a couple people, maybe more people end up in the emergency room because they ate too many edibles, but what does that mean? Like, okay, sitting here in the corner for 3 hours until you feel better and you can go home, that's not really a problem, right? I mean, how many people have ended up in the hospital with alcohol poisoning? How many of them have not walked back out of there, right? Like, that's a problem. This is you overdid it a little bit, and that's the worst thing that's happened. And so now people realize that, and I think it's been a big deal moving the industry forward.
And even some of those stories about being hospitalized for some edible, often it's a black market product. Or gray market product, not a regulated product.
Yeah, and so when you have labeling and dosage, there's a lot less of that. There may be more people using it for the first time, but that doesn't mean that it's causing that there's more of it happening, right? And the other thing I think people don't, underappreciate is when it's legal, if you think you need to go to the doctor, you do. When it's illegal, you're scared to go to the doctor and you don't, right? With cannabis, it doesn't really matter because there's, still, as far as I know, 0 reported deaths ever from cannabis. But with other drugs, and I think we should think about this in our broader drug policy, is if somebody thinks they need to go to the hospital, do you want them to be scared to do that? Or do you want them to do what they think they should do, right? So, roll another drug in place, and maybe you really should be going to the hospital, not trying to tough it out at home. And I think if you think about things from a harm reduction point of view, treating drugs in general as a health issue for those that it has a negative impact for, and a personal, freedom issue for the rest is a whole lot better than treating it as a law enforcement issue.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. I've been in the cannabis industry myself for about a decade at this point. And honestly, when I got in, it was very much for the opportunity, just kind of seeing this growing industry, wanting to jump in. And then as you get more invested in it, you learn about the harms of prohibition, you learn about the benefits of legalization. You have a real mission, to see this thing happen. And, we're all trying to push this thing forward and get it to a good place. And it's happening state by state. And as you mentioned, like the years of experience now is really proving that this is something that should be nationwide.
Yeah.
With your
for sure. I mean, I'm not going off on too much of a tangent, right? But I think cannabis is amazing. That's where my passion is. I think it's very clear that society with cannabis, a world with cannabis in it, is a better world, and that the drug war, which was never really a war on drugs, but was really a war on people, and specific brown and black-skinned people at that, was a bunch of bullshit, and we should get rid of it. But that, I think, is the leading indicator on the rest of things, right? Like, I mean, we're seeing decriminalization, we're seeing progress with psychedelics. Another thing that I think both can offer us a lot of benefit as a society, and that the prohibition against does a tremendous amount of harm that we can stop. But, like, there's places you can look. Portugal's one, Uruguay's one. I mean, you can even look at Oregon now, which just decriminalized personal possession of all drugs, right? Like, that is such a break from the way that we've done this last 50 years. And we're going to start seeing the data, and I think, especially if you look internationally, the data says that for most people, drug use is not a problem. For those people that it is a problem for, that's not a moral failing, it's a health issue. It should be treated with health services, not with law enforcement services, right? Like, if you want to reform policing, which I think broadly a lot of people do, the number one thing you could do is end the war on drugs and reduce the number of forced negative interactions with the police, and particularly, minority communities, which is where most of that reform needs to happen. So,
Exactly.
It seems pretty obvious to me, and I'm glad to see at least in a few pockets we're making progress.
Yeah, I definitely think we are. Sometimes it feels like a little too slow, but when you think about how far we've come in just a handful of years here, with anecdotes like Oregon, like you're mentioning, I think it does point in the right direction. So you've always been passionate about cannabis. Prior to being in the industry, you were in technology and product development, the tech industry. A very similar story to me. What drove the transition into the legal cannabis market?
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, not much transition. So I am a tech guy kind of by background and experience, but a cannabis lover by passion. But my perspective is that well done agriculture, which everything in cannabis starts with the plant, so it comes back at some form to growing the plant well, is done much better with technology. And precision agriculture is kind of the approach that we use. If you think about, it is kind of odd, but I actually think about, every company I'm a systems thinker by nature. Every company has at least one biological system in it. It's the people that are involved in it, right? Cannabis and agriculture, more broadly, happens to have two environmental, biological systems in it, right? One is the people and the other is the plant. And you're always solving for the people because I think our employees are the number one asset that we have. And every morning when we wake up, we think about our customers we're trying to make happy, the employees we're trying to give a good home to so that they can do their work to make those customers happy. And then, the value that we can create for shareholders from that, right? So that's how we think. And so taking care of both our biological systems is the main focus, the priority of what we do. If you think of the plant, you can almost think of it as a little bit like a black box computer program, right? Like plants are not arbitrary, they're not random. If you figure out what you want from the plant, for us it's terpenes and cannabinoids and flavonoids and nose and structure, right? Like if you figure out what you want and you give the plant consistent inputs, it will give you that every time. It's not like if you give it the same thing, it doesn't just change its mind, right? So it's like a little computer program. Feed it what you want to get what you want, right? So now if you figure that out, now your goal is how can I give it what it wants for the desired result that I have as consistently as possible and then as efficiently as possible. And if there's two things that technology is good at, it is consistency and efficiency, right? So if we can bring those things together, of course, with the right team to understand the plant, then that's the best case scenario. So everything that we try and do is about amplifying our love for the plant, not diluting it, right? And so when we say we want to do craft at scale, that doesn't mean that we want to do a whole bunch of mids, right? What we want to do is we want to take what we would do if we had 6 personal plants that we were loving and then scale that up so that we can do it more efficiently and more consistently, right? So when you take technology is good, computers are good at, okay, this is what I want you to do for this plant. I want you to do it every time. I want you to do it every time on Sundays and 2 a.m. and the weekends and the holidays, right? Like that's the thing that the computer can do that's really hard to do when you're doing things by hand. And so putting those things together, I actually think is a perfect marriage and gives us a perspective that not a lot of people, at least in cannabis, have yet, and that will allow us to hit a quality, consistency, and cost that not many others will be able to compete with.
Yeah, I love that. Technology is so good at solving inefficiencies, and thinking in systems like that is pretty clever because technology is all about systems, and I'd imagine that will really help with scale. When you have a market like California, where you guys are at, with the size of that market, right? And you really need to be able to scale, and you really need to have that consistency for the consumer experience. And that's a hard thing to do. And I can see how, leveraging technology and having that background can really help out with that.
I mean, I think, I understand why, some people say like we're big and this is Coors Light or, whatever. But I actually think that those folks don't necessarily know what big looks like. Like big hasn't showed up yet. And Monsanto hasn't showed up yet, right? Anheuser-Busch hasn't shown up yet. Like California is the 5th largest economy on the planet. Like if you believe that cannabis makes the world a better place like we do, then you want to make it the highest quality available to as many people as possible, which means you need scale and you need to be able to do it at a reasonable price, right? So we are not big cannabis. Big cannabis will come. It's not us. We, I think, are the ones who have a foot in a history firmly rooted in where cannabis is coming from, with a vision for where we want to take cannabis, right? And that, again, is amplification of the love, not dilution of the love for the plant, to bear that torch and carry that torch forward. So when big cannabis, which is going to be some dude with a spreadsheet and a suit who's never even smoked it, shows up, that we can tell them why they're in the wrong spot, and we can remind people of what this plant and this industry really means.
Yeah. There's a funny image of that guy walking in with a spreadsheet, but I don't think you're wrong. It will get there. It will get there certainly. But yeah, you're right. And California is massive, and it is such a good point. 5th largest economy. I think it's. We'll touch on kind of the SSO strategy, I think, in a minute here, and how you guys think about California, because it is such a unique market, and I think so much opportunity to build a brand there and then get that brand out across the country and maybe internationally at one point when all that stuff starts to open up. But before we talk about the retailers, I do want to discuss a bit about the brand portfolio. So you guys have Glasshouse Farms. You have Forbidden Flowers and Mama Sue. And I was reading about how those brands are positioned, from the everyday consumer with Glass House to an emerging, what I would consider an emerging audience, so female and Generation Z. And we see a lot of that in our data here at Headset, that those are two, really growing categories. Like Generation Z buys a disproportionately large amount of cannabis for the legal age that they're at, right? Because they're like 21, 22, 23 years old, because it's a pretty young generation. And so only a handful of years, but they are buying, well over 10% of cannabis for just, 3 years of age. So that's certainly an emerging audience. And I think that's associated with your Forbidden Flowers. And you have the wellness side. And I think wellness, and we'll talk about Mama Sue and the wellness category, but I think it's, so many people associate cannabis with recreation use, especially for adult use, but there is the wellness component that is quite interesting. So I would love to get your take on, how you guys at Glass House determined, what that brand portfolio would look like here with those three brands.
Yeah, so a great bunch of great questions embedded in there. And I certainly noticed your guys' report on the female Gen Z side of things, very much in line with our thinking. I think that market is over-indexes. I think it has amazing opportunities with cannabis, but I think very few people are actually speaking to it, right? And it's very canna curious. This is not their legacy user. That's not the folks who are typically, going to the doctor and telling them about their back hurting to get a medical card to go to a dispensary. It's this new people, and they're looking for direction, and that was the genesis of Forbidden Flowers, which is Bella Thorne is an authentic, real stoner. Like, I've hung out with her. She smokes way more than I do. She can roll a joint faster than I can. There is nothing greenwashing about Bella's endorsement and participation in Forbidden Flowers. And she has this awesome audience of that Gen Z female who's looking like, how do I integrate this, right? Like, I think part of the reason they over-index is because they've come of age when the stigma has started to go away, right? Like, they're not thinking, for a 20-year-old female, like, cannabis and alcohol are, like, the cannabis is probably more legal, right? Like, alcohol we know is 21 plus. If you got a medical card, cannabis can start at 18. Like, so they have a very different perspective, and I think that's why you see them much more normalized with their usage. That said, they're looking for somebody to say, okay, well, I take this before I want to clean my house and get something done. I take this before I want to go on a hike. I take this if I partied too hard last night. This for yoga, right? And so Bella can be that voice and give them the guidance of, here's CBDs, here's indicas, here's sativas, here's how the different strains are going to happen, here's pre-rolls, and all that kind of stuff. And so I think we're really seeing great traction with that, and I think the demographics are in our favor, and I think Bella's in our favor, and she's awesome and really has an ownership of that. We're going to start doing some stuff with hemp over there as well, so that we can reach out into other states, which I think is going to be exciting, because she's got obviously a much broader voice than California. So I'm really excited about what we're doing on that. Glass House Farms is kind of our core flagship brand, so to speak. It's the very flower forward, product forward thing, and it really represents who we are as farmers. From the point of view that the focus on the plant and the strains and trying to go quality at a fantastic product at an amazing price is our goal. I sometimes describe it as, we want to be the Casamigos of cannabis for the Whole Foods buyer, right? So it's not necessarily 1942 where it's special occasion and you'd be crazy to put it in a margarita. It's certainly not Jose Cuervo, right, where it's it's caramel sugars and artificial stuff. It's just that always the right answer. It's a shot of tequila on a Friday, it's a margarita on a Tuesday, it's great for a party, it's great for a birthday. Doesn't have to be a special occasion though, right? So, and then for the Whole Food side is for somebody who cares about how the product was made, right? So natural, sun grown, partnered with Mother Nature, not throwing her away, and recreating the whole thing from a in a warehouse kind of thing, but a very natural way to achieve high quality is really what Glass House Farms is all about. It's bounces around and kind of the number 2, number 3 brand in the state of California, which is a big deal, as you guys know from the data, right? Like, California is the largest market in the world. It's probably 25% of the country. Flower is probably 51 to 55% of that market if you include pre-rolls. So being number 2 And 50% of 25% means that brand is like, whatever that is, 12% of the national market or something like that for the category if you put the math together. So it's a pretty significant thing. I really like we have a quality, consistency, and cost approach, which is first you got to do it great. Then you got to do it great every time. Then you got to do it great every time efficiently, which translates into value and cost for the consumer, right? So we're trying to bring $70 quality at $35 prices with Glass House, and I think that's I think it drives right down the middle, and it'll be a really good fit for the existing as well as for the new consumers who are coming. And then on Mama Sue, health and wellness, I think obviously we led with medical in California, but just because it's medicine doesn't mean it can't be fun too, or just because it feels good doesn't mean it's not medicine, however you want to say it. And I think there's sometimes it's like recreational is not as good, but if you think about the word recreation, it's not actually as trivial as it sounds. That said, fun on a Friday night has no conflict with a tincture on a Tuesday night to help you sleep better, feel better, or, sore muscles after working out. And that's what Mama Sue is all about, is that kind of health and wellness, vitamins, anti-inflammatory, sleep, and pain relief are the two main products in that. Mama Sue is awesome. She's a 70-year-old African-American woman, former Catholic school principal, who realized the benefits of cannabis and has become an advocate ever since. And we're really stoked to be partnered with her.
That's great, and a great background. And you mentioned authentic when you're talking about Bella Thorne, and it sounds like Mama Sue, very similar, just really believes in it. And I think that's an important piece. And people are pretty clever, the consumer is pretty clever, and they can see through, the people that are see those that aren't maybe not as authentic. And I think the celebrities or the notable individuals who are associated with brands that are authentic, that does seem to come through, and I think that translates into overall success. With Forbidden Flowers and Bella Thorne, celebrity brands have some advantages because marketing can be quite challenging. I mean, in California, what was it, just a couple weeks ago now, there's a ban on billboard displays on interstate freeways, no matter where they're at in the state, and hopefully we see this assembly bill come through and that gets changed, but just one more channel that is gone. And so, with a celebrity brand and someone like Bella Thorne, with probably a sizable social media presence, do you guys find that that's an advantage? Is that part of the brand strategy to generate awareness, to have her platform to talk about Glass House and
I think Flowers? She's definitely an influencer and a megaphone in the space. So from the point of view of getting the message out, that's a strength that she has. I think in general, the advertising, the stigma in cannabis is still thick. Even in California, where we're 26 years medically legal and, coming up on 4 years of adult use, like the stigma is still very thick. Why would you not be able to advertise a store, right? Like you can, it's like, it's kind of crazy, but that's where we are in it. Why can you get all kinds of advertisements for pharmaceuticals on Instagram, but you can't advertise a plant, right? Why is it that cannabis social media accounts are shut down every day, but porn accounts aren't, or whatever? Like, it is still something that we fight with, and the only way is, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, as Martin Luther King Jr. says. So we're going in the right direction. It never feels like it's fast enough, but finding ways to reach consumers is very unique and challenging in cannabis. And I think it's part of the skill set. The opportunity is often, the challenge is often the opportunity, right? Like part of what we are developing that I think builds a moat around other industries coming into this is we're learning how to achieve success without all the tools. It's like riding, we're riding in the Tour de France, but our brakes are stuck halfway on and we're still keeping up. So we're developing a skill set that when those brakes come off, we're going to know how to do things that frankly, even, alcohol and tobacco and some of the other big players are not going to have experience with. They're not used to these kinds of frictions and regulations and things like that in quite the same way. And we will be, which I think will be part of the value that we create, and one of the ways that we can kind of hold on to the industry as we like it, even as change continues to happen.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The brakes are on, because it does feel like that from time to time. Sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back with this industry. But we all know the direction it's going, and you're absolutely right. If you can survive in this climate and thrive in this climate, when things kind of start to open up, and whatever that looks like, it's a massive opportunity in front of you. Other kind of celebrity-ish, I would say, is your collab line that you've done, like Jenny Lewis, musician, and Legion of Bloom, another producer, right? Legion of Bloom, is that right? Another grower?
Legion of Bloom's actually a brand. We have a minority investment in it, so it's slightly different category. The Jenny Lewis one is right up the alley of what you're talking about. I'm a music fan. I wish I could make it. I can't, and I would never subject anyone to me trying to, but I really enjoy it, and I think that cannabis and music is such an amazing combination that anywhere we can put that together, we love it. Jenny Lewis was a really fun artist to work with, and people really loved it, right? It was actually fun to watch, because I think it was in some ways the ideal collaboration, right? Like, people who had no idea who Glass House was, found us because they love Jenny Lewis, right? And I mean, I'm talking rabid, like calling up and trying to buy is up to their daily limit of the products because they loved it so much. And then conversely, we had a bunch of people who had no idea who Jenny Lewis was, but knew Glass House, and they're like, oh, well, I want to try that. Who is that? I'm going to listen to her music. And we actually did that collaboration, was a part of an album release, and and we worked with Jenny, and we didn't have time to like develop a strain from scratch, but one of the things we did is we brought a whole bunch of the menu that we have, and different strains and things like that, and she tried them all and went with the approach of like, if as you're making music, you're thinking, what instrument's the right feeling for this, right? Does this sound portray the emotion I'm trying to get across to the audience? But do that with cannabis, right? So which strain here matches your feeling of this song? As Down the Rabbit Hole, I think it was. And so she picked them all, and she's like, if the cannabis was the instrument, this is the instrument that I'd put with this track, which is a fun way, I think, to think of it. And so a bunch of people who liked Glass House went out and started listening to Jenny Lewis's album, and then smoked the joint, listened to the song, connected on a whole different level with the artist in terms of transmitting that emotion. And I thought it was kind of a pretty cool way to approach it.
It's such a cool way. I've seen some brands do like playlists where, they don't work with a single artist, but they'll say, okay, when you try this strain, listen to this playlist. But to work directly with the artist and have the artist say, okay, when I was thinking about this song, this is the pairing, almost as an instrument. That's huge. And I can see how that'd be really beneficial for Glass House to build an audience, right? And bring over Jenny Lewis fans, because it's your flower, right? It's Glass House flower. And so they can jump into the other brands in the portfolio, whether it's the Glass House brand or Forbidden Flowers brand or what have you. So are you thinking about doing more of those, or is that a one-off kind of experience?
No, we certainly would like to do more. I mean, we've done some other cool stuff, music related. We did Glass House Fest for 420 this year, which was really fun, and actually won a marketing award for NCIA as the best marketing for 420, which was certainly an honor and a testament to our marketing and engagement teams, where we did, at the time, we were still pretty just coming out of the pandemic, let's say, but it was not a get together and party quite yet. So we had a very small venue, all COVID safe, and then live streamed the whole thing for the people who couldn't be there, which we had a great audience show up. Really, Flying Lotus came and played, one of my favorite artists. And a bunch of comedians, and we did it with Jam in the Van, which has a big Instagram presence, and it was really fun because of course people were everyone was smoking and everyone was enjoying the music, and Duckworth was there and Black was there, and it was like it was awesome, and B, it was awesome on top of 14 months of zero awesomeness. And so I think it really stood out even more, and again, just such a reminder that music and cannabis are a perfect peanut butter and chocolate for each other.
Yeah, they really are. They certainly go well together. So speaking of strains, you mentioned the specific strain with Jenny Lewis. I was looking at Glass House Farms, like top strains, the flower, and some of the headset data, and I noticed that Super Silver Haze and Gorilla Glue, when I was looking at the last 365 days, last year basically, really, really successful as far as sales. How how do you guys think about your strain portfolio and the genetics that you produce? Are you looking at Super Silver Haze and Gorilla Glue number 4 are, I think, well-established, known strains. People might come in and see those almost as brands unto themselves and say, I love Super Silver Haze, I'll try Glass Houses. And we know other brands that try and do their own genetics or, maybe produce strains that aren't readily available as a way to kind of differentiate. How do you guys think about strains when it comes to your flower line?
Yeah, so a lot lately, and even more than we have historically. We kind of started maybe like many did with a little bit of a hodgepodge. That Super Silver Haze cut in particular is a cut that I've been growing for 25 years, so wow. It's been around for a long time. I'm personally am kind of a sativa fan. You probably tell by my energy. I'm a lot more on the active side than on the relax and the couch side. So I tend towards the sativas, and I've always really liked that cut because it's such a pure sativa, right? I mean, it's not, the standout is not the nose or whatever. It's just that really energetic kind of sativa associated high. It tests pretty high. We oftentimes have batches of that are over 30%, which is great and certainly a mover in the market. So I know I'm a big fan of that. We also have a great Gorilla Glue cut, so that in a particular cut of GG4 I think is really strong. And on the other end of the spectrum, if you're looking for I'm trying to shut my brain off, I want to sit down, I want to watch a movie, and whatever, that Gorilla Glue is also awesome. And then, we're really working hard to develop our genetic library. We believe that the genetics are super important. It's just as much work to grow something fantastic as it is to grow something good. So we should always be trying to grow fantastic. We've done some in-house breeding. We're currently working with a number of breeders to bring strains that they have to the market. And really, it's kind of that always. No strain is safe, right? Like we're always R&Ding, and anything that comes out that if something's better than the worst thing on the list, we'll kick it off or add it or whatever. So we're really looking for a menu that gets people excited and whatever. All the way we have a jellyfish cut, which is I think one of my favorite CBD flowers I've ever seen. Typically, 0.5% THC, but 15-16% sometimes CBD. There's some CBC and CBG in there as well. So it is truly a medicine, or truly something if you're just looking for that calm, like, if you're thinking glass of wine versus shot of tequila, the jellyfish is an awesome strain. It also makes a really good, I'll call it a mixer, right? Which is if you're looking for that margarita, something in the middle, not quite wine, not quite tequila, some of our orange creamsicle, which tastes amazing, mixed with jellyfish to kind of, dilute it down a little bit and maybe make it not quite so potent for the occasions when that's the best fit, is an awesome combination. So looking at different ways that we can do blends and ratios and things like that as well.
That's cool. Love to see that variety that you guys are thinking about. So beyond the brands, I want to talk a bit about your retail footprint. So Glass House Group has retail footprint as well as the brand portfolio. And one of the things when I think about the CPG, like a traditional CPG industry, consumer packaged goods industry, and retail, often, CPG is separate from retail, but in cannabis, we find that it's often connected when you think about the SSOs like Glass House, having both. And I think that it makes a lot of sense for the way the industry is structured today. Every state is different. It has different legal frameworks, and it kind of, in some like limited license markets, you have to have your own brands because there are no brands to stock your shelves with, and, very strict vertical integration. And others like California, there are a lot of brand only, CPG companies that don't have a retail footprint. And there's others like you guys that have both. And I think there's some significant advantages to having both, right? Because you can talk to the consumer, you can talk to them directly, and if you're just a brand, you
also listen to them, which I think is just as important.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and so that's. It definitely has some advantages that other brands don't have. Do you think that, the cannabis industry will always remain an exception like this as it continues to mature, in the sense of, retail footprint that produces brands that also distribute to other potentially competitive retailers with their products?
Yeah, well, a couple of things in there. One is I love that you're using SSO. For those that might not know, that's a single state operator. In the case of California, a super state operator. So, kind of on the other end of the barbell from the MSO model. So just make sure everyone knows what you're saying when you say that. I love hearing you use the term because we think like that as well. I think cannabis is amazing, but I do not think it is going to continue to be an exception from the CPG side of things. I think right now vertical integration is key. We are a brand and product company, but to be able to do that, you need two things right now, and there's no one kind of to outsource those things to, so we do them ourselves, right? On the one hand, you need quality biomass at scale for a reasonable cost that's consistent, right? Like that's a given in most other areas, right? In most other areas, brand heavy, asset light in CPG is the norm, right? And I think cannabis will get there, but brand heavy, asset light assumes a mature supply chain, and cannabis, particularly in California, is anything but a mature supply chain. So if you want high quality, consistent, low cost, scale biomass, we're one of the largest greenhouse growers in the state. Like, we want to get 10 times bigger. Who do you outsource that to? You can't, because no one has blazed that trail yet, so we're blazing our own. And similarly on the retail side, right, the other thing you need to make a brand is the ability to have the interaction with the customer, right? That means putting products out there. It means listening to what they think of the products. It means educating bud tenders. It means having shelf space. It means being able to collect the analytics and, with partners like you guys to see what's going on so that we can understand where do we need to make products. Then we can beta test them in our stores. We can get honest feedback from our team members as well as customers, see where we got it right and see where we got it wrong, adjust, and then drive down the lanes where we're succeeding. So that is how we believe you build brands. And now in California, is you have those two bookends. And I think you made a great point, which I think is really important. In California, there is a lot of competition, right? If your goal is near term and to make money, winning a license in a limited license state is awesome, and it's a great accomplishment. But once you have it, you operate in a quasi-monopoly and in a vacuum, right? Like, okay, that's great. If there's 4 licensees and you're the best one, you're the best of 5, right? Like, right. That means that's like being the best player on your 6th grade soccer team. That doesn't mean that you can win the World Cup, right? In California, there's 1,600 plus brands, right? If your goal is to make products and to make brands that win, you need competitive feedback. You need to know that consumers don't have 4 other choices. They have 1,600 other choices. And so when we make a product and someone buys it, and then they buy it again and again and again, which you can see in their data they are, we can say we're confident that we're winning the World Cup with this product, right? And that's great, but more importantly is when we make something and they don't buy it again, right? Like, that negative competitive feedback is really the important thing, because that way you don't think you're winning when you're not, right? Like, brands in other states, not very many examples of them coming from California, right? Brands in California, longer and longer list of them going to other states. So our belief is if you can win in the competitive environment in California, you can win anywhere, but the inverse of that is not necessarily true. Part of the reason we like California is it's the largest, most discerning and experienced consumer base out there. And so that's the market that we want to train in, because what we're trying to play for is the World Cup.
That's a great outlook, and I think your point about the single state operator, the super state. I like that super state operator. That's a good way to think about it, because California is quite a unique state, as we mentioned, like the size of the economy alone. But being an SSO in California, that kind of trial by fire, right? You're competing against a lot of brands, and not just a lot of brands, but some really good brands as well. And if you can win there, that transition out to other markets, it seems like you'll have a lot. Be set up for that success, that World Cup that you're talking about when you're playing at the national level or maybe international level. We'll end up. I don't know why we wouldn't, right? I mean, my belief is that interstate commerce will happen. I think you can see it all over. You see what Chuck Schumer's doing. Whether you think that's going to take 12 months or 60 months is kind of immaterial to, do you think it's actually not going to happen, right? I mean, you can see what Clarence Thomas said. Clarence Thomas is out there, Supreme Court justice, saying this doesn't make sense anymore. I'm not even sure if it's constitutional. I think the Dormant Commerce Clause of the Constitution would say it's absolutely not constitutional. If you want to ban a product, you can ban it, but you got to apply that evenly to everybody. You can't say only banned for non-residents, right? They've tried. All those regulations get struck down. Like, federal judges strike them down, right? If you
there is protectionism within the United States is not something that we do, right? It's written in our Constitution that a farmer should have the entire United States as his market, right? Protectionism against other countries, we're totally comfortable with, so that will be further away. But within the state, like if you're going to allow it, you got to have a level playing field for everybody. So whether it's the Congress or the courts, interstate commerce is coming, and the appellation of California and the market dynamics and the incubator and the natural selection here, we believe will be the feeder for the rest of that country. Once that happens though, like we can, I mean, Canada's legal, Mexico's Supreme Court legalized it, like the rest of the North American continent is ahead of us. Europe is going, like there's going to be no reason eventually that we won't be shipping products internationally. We know that the world wants California cannabis everywhere. They smuggle it into legal states, right? Like, so what more do you need to know about what consumers want than the fact that even when cannabis is legal in somewhere like Colorado or Florida, people are still smuggling California brands in there, right? Like, we know what they want. So
right,
it's a matter of time till they can get it.
Yeah, the appellation aspect of it is true. I mean, people always talk about California cannabis wherever they're at. I think another unique aspect of California is the direct-to-consumer market. You know, you have the delivery framework there. Most markets or many markets do not have that. You know, I'm sitting here in Seattle and we do not have any delivery framework. And the direct-to-consumer model is something that's, I think, coming around. You know, we see it in other CPG industries, the Dollar Shave Club and what have you, right? DTC to me, you need a good marketing engine, right? Because without a retail footprint where people can come in and talk to the bud tenders or whoever can guide them to the brands, it's a lot harder, right? They have to discover your brand. But you guys have a retail footprint. Do you guys also think about a DTC model, like going direct to consumer in addition to your retail with the brand portfolio that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 4 stores open today. Every one of those stores runs delivery out of it. So we do delivery now. So from that point, from the retail point of view, we are doing DTC. From the brand point of view, we have not yet, but certainly expect that we will. Part of the reason that we're building right now, we're going to add. We'll be at 23 stores by the end of second half next year. So quite a retail footprint coming. And part of the reason for that is because we think each or most of those retail locations becomes a hub for delivery, right? So my belief is that delivery will really take off as consumers develop brand loyalty, which I think we're in the early days of. There's maybe brand preference. But not a whole lot past that yet. I think that education and that lead gen and experience and browsing happens at retail. Part of the reason we're leading with the retail side. Once people know, like, okay, I want Glass House Farm Super Silver Haze. Now it's just a matter of how conveniently can I get it. That's, I think, when you transition to a real delivery customer. I think a lot of the delivery customers out there right now are call them bought, right? Like there's so many promos that happen on delivery. If you give somebody $20 and they buy a $22 product, I don't know how much of a customer that is, right? And especially if when the other delivery competitor gives them $20 next week, do they go over there and get the $22 product, right? So I like delivery that comes from retail because now it's just a transition of a customer that you already own. So for us, I think that will be the next evolution of DTC is our 23 stores of retail become hubs. Brand has become more prominent with loyalty. Customers have come into the store and now they know the products. They can go to the website, they can go to the store website, they can delivery across the state. Like that's where I think delivery really kicks in. And I would call it phase 3. I mean, it's certainly here, but post COVID, it's 5 to 10% of a business or something like that. Consumers still want to come in and shop and they still want to browse because things are new for a lot of them, and then they go to convenience. And so I think that'll be wave 3 is when delivery really comes into its own.
Yeah, and they also, often will buy, multiple things at retail. Maybe they'll buy the Super Silver Haze and they'll throw in, something else as well. And that's a lot harder when you're just a single brand going direct to consumer for some of those that are in California attempting that now. But I think, over time, I think all those points you made, the loyalty is getting there, right? We're looking at it too, and it's not quite there. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with marketing. I think a lot of that has to do with the new consumers coming in and all these different brands, but it will get there. It will get there, and you're absolutely right. When that happens, then I think the framework is set up. But it all goes to your point. Like if you are kind of playing the World Cup now in California, if you are, competing against DTC brands and these 1,600 other brands that are there and other large retailers all at the same time, fighting on all these different fronts and succeeding, then I think that as you move to other markets, it's pretty straightforward because you've seen it all at that point. So to wrap it up here, anything on the horizon upcoming with Glasshouse we should be keeping our eyes peeled for? Yeah,
lots of things on the horizon. One thing we didn't touch on at all is 3 weeks ago we went public via a combination with Mercer Park, which was a SPAC, and had I think probably one of the third largest fundraisings in U.S. cannabis this year. So lots of hard work. Did it through a pandemic. Challenging, new. If I thought I was busy before, I had no idea that it could get that much busier, but now we're on the other side of that, trading on the NEO as GLAS and over the counter as GLASF. So just think of Glasshouse Farms, and that's an exciting new development for us. And the reason to do it is because we've got a bunch of really exciting things on the horizon. All the new retail stores that I was mentioning there, looking to be 23 stores by the end of first half next year. A big new farm on the way that we're getting ready to close on, which is going to be the front end of building that national supply chain. I think it'll take our quality to the next level. I think it'll take our cost down to a whole nother level, and it will give us a scale that we can really drive home that the tip of the spear is brands, but today you've got to have the supply chain behind it to do the things that we want to do, and so we're excited to be building that. And I think the next 24 to 36 months are going to be an amazing time in cannabis, in my opinion. Lucky to be here to have a chance to work on the things we're working on.
Fantastic. I feel the same way. Well, thanks so much, Graham. We'll look out for all that stuff and appreciate the time today, and looking forward to trying that Super Silver Haze sometime.
Yeah, come on down to California. We'd love to give you a tour.
Yeah, we'll do.
Thanks for joining CPG, the Cannabis Packaged Goods Podcast. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.